Welcome back to another episode of the Big Three, the podcast where we uncover the biggest trends, shifts, and insights shaping influencer marketing and the creator economy. I'm your host, Ceci Carloni, and for today's episode, I'm joined by George Manny, Chief Growth Officer at ehko.ai. George has been working across media, tech, and the creator space for years, and he brings a very thoughtful perspective on where the industry is really heading. George, welcome. I'm so glad we're finally doing this. How are you today?
Doing well, Ceci. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, it's a crazy time of year and everything is moving. The media ecosystem is going through some fundamental seismic changes right now and excited to dig in with you. The creator economy is growing and it's all extremely exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting time of the year too. Q4 is always fun.
To your point about Q4 excitement, I started off my career in finance and we'll talk about it more in a bit. But since moving to media side, always every Q4, I always had retail clients. My first kind of client was in the big box retail space. So never a moment between Thanksgiving and, they call it shipping cutoff is the last date that you can ship packages.
Yeah, yeah. George, okay, let's kick things off. Honestly, let's start at the beginning because your background is such an interesting mix. You've worked across so many different corners of the industry, digital publishing, ad tech, multicultural media, working directly with agencies and brands. Tell us, how did that path eventually lead you into the creator economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I moved to New York initially to work in finance and did that through the bust and the boom, learned a lot, and then moved over to the agency side when iCrossing was actually an independent agency before it was bought by Hearst and
Okay.
started to kind of learn how similar media was to finance in terms of how dollars trade. There's kind of $1 tied to an ad. That ad needs to be placed. So there is a marketplace that I realized is actually exactly the same as how stocks trade. And got very familiar with the infrastructure of Google, how brands buy ads with Google. YouTube was still new at that point, which is kind of crazy to think about now, given how ubiquitous YouTube is. Facebook was just being, and you couldn't even really buy ads in an automated way on Facebook. So I'm actually seeing a lot of the challenges that the creator economy is going through right now. It's very reminiscent to the early days of the media ecosystem with some tech giants coming to fold. And then just in terms of rounding out my career, I spent about 15 years in New York and moved through my career to, biz dev eventually because I realized that I wanted to be in the field talking to customers. I'm essentially kind of a big nerd at heart and I like to learn constantly. So my solution for that was, why don't I start selling to major, huge media companies? It didn't matter what. I found kind of some interesting software to sell, but I was selling to folks like Disney and Comcast and Sky. And basically, it was actually very creative because I had to figure out, okay, what are all the different stakeholders? How do I engage with them? Who's a decision maker? Who's an influencer? You kind of do that dance. And then I was kind of at that company for 4.5 years, running all sales globally. And then I started to get the entrepreneurial itch, and through that job was working very closely with the CEOs of a lot of specialty publishers, I would say. So these are publishers within the BIPOC, so BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, Color, Hispanic, and LGBTQ space. So everybody from Q Digital on the LGBTQ side, Equal Pride, Essence, Ebony, etc., started to realize a lot of the challenges that these companies and media companies in general were having, and that related to revenue diversification. For so long, their businesses were funded by a few advertisers placing ads on their websites. They had events too. A lot of these companies do major events throughout the year, but that was a risk. And I kept on thinking to myself, social is so huge. Why don't these companies begin producing content for social that is designed for TikTok, that's designed for Instagram? Why don't they start like building influencers, direct relationships with influencers underneath their media umbrella? Because they do have these powerful brands that resonate. So that was kind of the itch, how I started to think about it. And then I believe in kismet, serendipity.
Yeah.
Randomly the founders of Echo through a friend when I was at the Cannes Lions Media Festival and met them. They explained to me what they were doing, and I was like, "Let's go."
So, well, I want to go back to your background. I mean, given everything that you've seen in media and community led publishing, was there a moment in your career when it really hit you that the creator space needed something different, maybe something more, a bit more infrastructure, a new way of supporting creators and the communities around them? Uh, and I
Yeah.
know that you briefly mentioned what opened your eyes to that gap, but tell us a bit more.
Yeah, let me tell you a bit more. So, the moment that I realized what needed to happen in the creator space was probably, it's been a slow evolution over the past 2 years, I would say, where,
Mhm.
although there are strong headlines now about AI eating the businesses because of zero-click search. Now when you go to Google, you can search for something and the results instantaneously pop up. What a lot of folks who aren't in the weeds kind of fail to realize is there are, you know, economy is built on people clicking through websites because when you click through to the website, there are sponsorships that brands have. There are ads that you see that fund the business. There's traffic that funds the business. So, I've been seeing over the past 2 years, I would say Facebook beginning to restrict the amount of traffic that is going outside of the Meta as the walled garden. In the early days of Meta, it was very collaborative. The social platforms were kind of very collaborative with the publishing in the independent kind of, journalism industry where there was traffic sharing. So that was kind of the first kind of, cue to me that something has to change. There needs to fundamentally be a different way that these brands as media companies think about social. Obviously, the walled gardens are the walled gardens, and you need to kind of play in the context of
Oh,
the walled gardens and the rules, including of YouTube. The other thing that opened my eyes was I started to help a few clients that were, essentially trying to launch TV networks. And if you think of how TV is now, it's very different than what TV was before, the newsroom model. 2020, in the days of like Barbara Walters, where you would turn on your TV and it was very glossy. And, there were two talking heads and there were probably 50 makeup people in the background and producers running around. That model, I realized, over the past year is dead because it's so expensive to launch a TV network. Nobody tunes in the same way, where the TV is not the centerpiece of attention anymore. Our attention is distributed, which is so apparent in the creator economy, where folks go to find info. And I know we're going to dig into it further. That was cue number two, where I realized that the business model of how these folks have traditionally made money is broken. And number 3 was realizing that a lot of these execs are not really willing to change in terms of,
yeah.
come up in the industry for 30, 40, 50 years, whoever knows how long. It's almost that there is a lack of desire to give consumers what they want simply because that's not the way things have been done.
Where do you think that unwillingness to change is coming from?
I think it could come from a lack of understanding, honestly, because
Oh,
social is very new, influencer is very new, and producing content in the way that people want to consume, where I am making the connection where people want to now consume snackable, easy, kind of authentic content that is very anti the old TV model, which is remember you would watch TV before in the past and it's almost like there's like a layer of Vaseline over the screen because you couldn't see it's just very, very glossy. So I think it's partially due to a lack of understanding. And honestly, I think it's a really amazing opportunity for young people to think about the workforce and, leadership roles that if you're a creator, you're in it right now. You see how individuals are consuming. You see how society and culture is evolving. It's actually a really interesting opportunity if you think of the workforce and ability for these folks to kind of influence the media ecosystem.
George, I would like to know a bit more about how your background, especially your work with multicultural publishers, shape your understanding of community and influence. And what do you think? What unique perspective do you feel that gives you today? both
Mhm.
at your role at Echo and in the broader creator economy?
That's a really loaded question, and I
Yes.
how the best way to answer it. The multicultural space is fascinating because since 2020, it's been become very politicized. After the George Floyd crisis and tragedy, there were a lot of companies that entered the multicultural space simply to earn revenue, for lack of a better word. They saw it as an economic opportunity and kind of stood companies up simply to catch those dollars and were not authentic in how they were trying to catch those dollars. 5 years forward, that strategy has come to kind of bite a lot of them, um, in the behind because you can't really do that as part of a sustainable business. So, long story short, what I've learned with the multicultural community is regardless of the headwinds and what is kind of in vogue at any moment in time, that you do have a very loyal community, whether it be within the Hispanic, BIPOC, or LGBTQ. You have consumers that are actually buying product, and you have, amongst this cohort, you have a sense of community that connects individuals within the community. And it's really important for brands to have a cohesive message and to not flip flop. I saw that with the Bud Light challenges that they were
Yeah.
having.
I think we discussed that last time we chatted.
Yeah, the challenge is that, it becomes very clear if a brand is showing up for Black History Month and not showing up for the rest of the year, or if you have corporate sponsors at the Gay Pride parade in New York City and you see Citibank and you see all these Fortune 50 companies, yet you don't hear from them throughout the year. So what I began to realize is that there has to be a better way for brands to like really lean into the community component and to try to work with the brands as part of authentic storytelling to change the way that media is viewed and to really kind of lean in and to lean into the fact that these media companies do have strong communities and to make that part of the interaction with the brands as opposed to just placing an ad on the page. Nobody likes ads. Ads are boring. So that is kind of my takeaway in terms of multicultural. The other thing I will say within this space, having worked in the space and knowing so many players in the space, the thing that marketers sometimes fail to realize is that multicultural isn't niche anymore. If you look at the purchasing power of LGBTQ, it's like 1.7 trillion. If you look at Hispanic, is the fastest growing segment in terms of I think it would be top 5 in terms of GDP if it was its own country. So these hyper politicized conversations around canceling budgets
Mm.
related to these cohorts is actually just bad business. So that's something that I've been trying to like push through. Regardless of identity politics, if you're a brand that is looking to acquire new customers, you need to be embracing these communities.
Absolutely. George, I would like to go back to something that you briefly mentioned before, which is you joined Echo. And again, I think you've seen firsthand how influence actually works at a human level. So I would like to fast forward to today. We know you're the Chief Growth Officer at Echo AI, which again sits at the intersection of all the things we've been talking about so far. How did that transition happen? What drew you into this role? And what about Echo resonated most deeply with you?
Mhm. Yeah, so as Chief Growth Officer of Echo, this is, I think sometimes opportunities only come around a few times in a lifetime, sometimes once in a lifetime, and this was a series of random events that happened. And so I'm really leaning into the order of the universe and the energy that that represents. And so when I think of Echo, it really is a culmination of all of the things that we have been talking about to date.
Mm.
How is media changing? The ways and the sources of information are different than they were. You cannot argue that. Google search is actually not as dominant as it was before. And the reason that Gemini is pushing their results to the degree that they're pushing is because they're trying to keep up with ChatGPT. It is a race right
Yeah.
now. And there's nobody thinking about how to make money around everything. All of these companies are losing billions of dollars. It's a race for eyeballs. It's actually a really disruptive, exciting time. The other thing is the challenges that the walled gardens themselves present because although consumption is happening within the walled gardens like Meta, TikTok, there is a level of protection that exists within the walled gardens that only is for the benefit of the walled garden because these are publicly traded companies. They have shareholders, they have businesses that they need to protect. So when I saw Echo, it kind of the light bulb went off in my head where I realized this is how individuals, specifically younger individuals today, are making life decisions. They are leaning into the influence that these creators have cultivated for themselves. And I saw kind of a really, natural fit for the product in the market based on all the dynamics that we just talked about. Folks kind of pulling away from the traditional TV model, media companies and websites not being kind of the powerhouses they were before. In the past, you would kind of go to the Atlantic.com, you might have that bookmarked. That behavior is very different now. Folks will go to like TikTok. Even if you're having some thoughts as to, I'm taking a vacation to Mexico, where should I go? The behavior is no longer that you go to normal sources, you kind of go to creators. So I kind of saw what they were building and I told them that, this is actually a bigger idea than I think you even realize because, like, you have the ability to influence the way an entire generation consumes
Yeah.
and learns and, buys, really. And I likened it actually to the early days of YouTube because I saw when YouTube was coming to being, and that was right after Google had bought YouTube. So that was kind of the connections that I made there.
George, for listeners who may not know, how do you describe Echo in your own words and tell us a bit about what problem is Echo solving right now in the creator economy and why it's so important?
Yeah, I would say that Echo is a way for fans and brands, importantly, to connect with followers 24/7 to alleviate the great challenge that we just talked about. Consumers are leaning into creators more and more. Creators are becoming the source of truth for an entire generation. And, some of these creators are getting, tens of thousands of new followers a day. All of these followers kind of want something
Messages.
from, yeah, messaging of, 10,000, 20,000 messages a day we've heard, and it's becoming really overwhelming for the creators to kind of keep up and to remain authentic and to keep kind of doing everything that they're doing because remember, these people are now businesses. Usually, a business has an entire support staff and infrastructure, including technical infrastructure. So, if you think of even the biggest creators, they don't have a staff in house kind of running their tech. Their staff in house running their tech is Facebook staff running the tech, or like TikTok staff running the tech. So, we're really positioning Echo as a mechanism to really step in and give fans what they want from creators, which is kind of on demand, always on access. We're thinking of it as an opportunity for brands to really find ways to connect with consumers when consumers are kind of raising their hand that there's a need. I'm really experiencing dry skin. Like, what kind of product would you recommend? And that actually circles back because my feeling is that creators haven't been directly compensated well enough for the influence that they have. So we're trying to create a new commercial model where the creators first and foremost are compensated for the outsized influence that they have on their communities. Last thing I'll say is that we're hoping to alleviate some of the administrative burden in terms of responding to messages. It might seem
Yeah.
simple, but it can take the entire day. That way, what we've heard is that that frees up time so creators can focus on editing and producing new content to keep building community.
George, obviously, I know how Echo works because I talked to both Nico and Ale. They're amazing. But could you briefly explain what Echo does? It creates like a digital persona for
Yeah.
the creators and the brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So think of Echo as creating an aura that is perpetual of the creator. So if you are a fitness creator, what Echo does is we look at all of your portfolio of work, like an artist has a portfolio of work. We will look at the overall portfolio of work in order to train our model. And that model is designed to be an authentic version of you. We are very intentionally kind of opposing the way that some of the bigger platforms are trying to introduce full-on headless avatars into the fold because we don't believe that creates authentic community and authentic connection. And I know there's a lot of fear in the community right now with regard to AI and how that potentially can disrupt economic livelihoods. Our goal at Echo is to kind of learn, build your Echo, your aura that you own, you to directly kind of, benefit from any kind of like brand partnerships that we're able to broker for you. That's the other kind of side of Echo where we actually act as an agency almost, where we kind of aggregate brand partnerships for you as a
Yeah.
creator. So we're alleviating burden, we're freeing you up, we are bringing you brand partnerships, and we're helping to solve a technical challenge, which is to date, a lot of these brand partnerships have been very manual and really janky to kind of implement. That is something that's broken in the economy that we're looking to fix to try to create automation and scalability for the brand partnership side of things.
Absolutely. But it's not just a like a technical issue. You just use the term burden. We also talked about creator burnout a lot.
Yeah.
And this is something that actually comes up a lot in my interviews and my conversations with both creators, brand management agencies. Tell us, George, from your vantage point, why do you think creators are burning out at the rate we're seeing? Where do you think the
Yeah.
pressure is coming from?
To honestly say that the pressure is coming directly both from them. There is a high um, standard that I think a lot of these creators hold themselves to because they ultimately are entrepreneurs. And I think that is great, but it also forces creators to kind of always work to the maximum. And I think that is being exacerbated by the fact that what we talked about, the media world is changing. Folks aren't going to websites. The addressable pie, if you think of the pie as this big, the pie might be this big now of where brands can now go to place their investments. So as 26 upfront planning is happening right now for media agencies, there's an increased focus on the creator economy. So there's more focus on placing dollars with creators, and that's applying even more pressure for the creators to produce content because you may get briefed by a brand, if you have the Miami Tourism Board brief travel creator, tell us some big ideas, that you're thinking about, for the campaign. We want to include you, but you need to pitch us. So there is more of that happening where brands are really applying the pressure, I think, to creators. And then creators are seeing it as a bottom line. The stakes keep on getting higher, where every year the sophistication is growing. And then my suspicion is that creators are looking at the bottom line too and thinking, okay, I grew this much last year. I need to do this many brand partnerships this year to sustain the business that I've created. So I would say it's pressure from the the brand side where there's kind of an increased want to align with creators would say it is also resultant from the fact that as a result of that, creators are just, have been focused on growing and growing and growing their communities authentically, are having challenges of keeping up with the pace of putting out that authentic content. And then honestly, things like Echo can help with, which is responding. We've heard so many times that creators get asked the same questions thousands of times. So
Yeah.
why not kind of take from the archive and respond back as your authentic you? The third thing, and this is a little bit more nuanced, is that we want to, we spoke about the agency component that creators are sometimes kind of out alone in the desert when it comes to negotiating these brand deals. There is a lot of rich information we have in the context of like Echo Chat, where we would be able to partner with a travel creator, just using that example, in kind of helping that travel creator when they go to the tourism of Miami, being like, oh, look at some of the main topics that your creators communities are talking about when it comes to traveling to Miami. Wouldn't you want to kind of align? So we're trying to also alleviate some of the burnout and burden there.
Yeah. George, I want to go back to a few things that you mentioned. The first one is brands being sort of part of the problem, to put it some way. How do you think brands can actually become part of the solution? What should brands be doing differently to support creator well-being going forward?
I love this question because Brands have been fed the fallacy, I think, that more is more, and that has been a function of the amount of places they've been able to place ads as almost being limitless. Turn on your TV, you have ads everywhere. Turn on your well, I mean, the TV is probably the best example because it drives me
Mm,
crazy. I'll get the same Ulta Beauty ad I'm getting now, like, 10 times in a row.
yeah,
So, I think part of the problem is that there is this want for unlimited scale no matter what they're buying. Like, if you're buying TV, the reality is that I think that brands need to really, really think carefully, and we are trying to help there in terms of how are you investing with the creator? How are you pricing this? Because there needs to be payment for quality over quantity, in our opinion. So we're trying to change the economic model for brands to, place appropriate value there. Because the reality is that a creator may have 100,000 followers, but may get 10 million engagements a month, which is really extremely valuable. And that needs to be communicated to a brand that might be used to placing a billion exposures a month. That you can get the same value from these 10 million versus the billion. I think part of the pressure is that they're placing the same quantity requirements right now on the influencer economy, and the math just doesn't work. Part of the problem is that there are a lot of companies that have created businesses for themselves by playing in this world of billions of exposures, but you and I know those billions of exposures, if you see the same ad 50 times on the TV back to back, they're not going to be it's not an effective way. So there's a new model that needs to be pushed, and we have to push for it collectively as a community, honestly.
yeah, yeah. George, I was going to talk about something that you also slightly mentioned, but I think that's covered. I mean, we know that brand budgets shifting to into social that also created a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of pressure. Would you agree with me? I mean,
I would agree with you, and I can't tell you the brand, but I was in New York a few weeks back, and I was talking to a brand, major D2C brand, and they control a nine-figure plus budget, so over $100 million.
wow.
What he was telling me, and he controls their agency of record, he was telling me that it's all about acquisition, the media has to work, and the only thing that they're seeing really work and scale right now is social. So I was actually pitching him on Echo and kind of like what we're doing. He was like, "Sounds great. Tell me more." But that is what's happening. So I think part of the thing is we have to really focus on metrics because you cannot shy away from metrics. And there's no doubt one of the reasons that the TikTok shop is so successful is because they drive product. They push product. So my thing is that as a community, we just have to continue focusing on that. That influencers are culture. That's what another brand told us. Culture is defined in these influencer spaces. The movement of culture is happening within influencer. And we need to align with that because that's how we acquire new customers and how we retain the customers that we have already.
Yeah. George, again, going back to something that you mentioned before, we obviously need to talk about AI, go a bit deeper into that conversation. Do you think AI is actually relieving creative pressure? Do you feel it's adding a new kind of pressure at the same time? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's been very polarizing, the AI, because the AI companies are trying to develop their own business models at the same time because none of these companies are
So,
profitable. They're losing billions of dollars. And as a result of it, I don't think there has been a conscious effort to really help other members of the ecosystem, which is why it's kind of created an opportunity for companies like us and other companies in the space to really mystify AI for creators because unfortunately, what I see happening is that you have huge companies leaning into AI to replace the creator. And that we don't think is going to be a successful long term strategy because ultimately, the FOMO is that you have the ability, it may not happen, but you have the ability to meet a creator in real life. You may run into them somewhere. There's that want and there's that aspirational component. You can't really meet a robot version of anybody. And as a
mm,
result of it, the influence that that person has is not going to be great. That's why AI full-on avatars might have like 0.001% engagement, whereas the one we talked about, beauty influencer from Atlanta, 50,000 followers, might have a 10% engagement rate. I would say it's very scary right now, but, you know, everything is new and evolving and changing, which presents massive opportunity for the creator economy.
Absolutely. George, and I do have to say I agree with you. AI is a very sensitive topic in the creator world, but something I want to go back to something that you said maybe in a previous conversation we had. You said that AI isn't replacing creators, but it's replacing the unsustainable parts of their job. Can you expand on that and maybe
Yeah.
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 Talk about what does scaling yourself without burning out actually look like as well.
Yeah, this is a great example of that. So AI should be an augmentation of it shouldn't create kind of, new DNA for the creator, if that's a good analogy. Like a DNA is kind of a piece of content. The AI is meant to kind of look at all of the content that you've produced in the past and to kind of like piece it together in a way that saves you brain power. So then you can focus on producing more content that adds to your library, because a creator is like an artist producing a portfolio and they're maintaining that portfolio, and that portfolio is living and breathing. So I would say that AI has the ability to really automate a lot of the tedious database related tasks for creators. And the other thing I will say is that we talk about AI having kind of like human intelligence and such. It's not there yet. And I actually see it being kind of far off from getting there. Right now, the way to think of it is that the best way to use AI is for it to kind of augment your human
Yeah.
processes. And our theory and my hypothesis is that's going to have the best consumer response to be very transparent with the involvement of AI in your work as a creator, and then to kind of get the consumer buy-in, because the worst thing that you don't want, and we're beginning to see this kind of in Hollywood, there are full-on AI characters coming out. There's huge backlash against all of that.
Yeah. George, again, something that you mentioned before, you said that creators have been super focused on building that authentic relationship with their followers, and that also maybe aggregates an element to that burnout because it's almost like unsustainable to keep that authenticity across all the engagement with those followers. How do we maintain that authenticity when AI enters the conversation?
Yeah, it really needs to be very well thought in terms of how you use AI for your business. I would argue that it probably doesn't make sense to shoot AI content, to have even AI content be part of one's feed or part of one's kind of portfolio. Because
Really?
community members so, kind of used to your content and the type of content and that level of authenticity, that's not a good strategy. The use of AI honestly has to be to create sustainable foundation for, uh, to bring economic resources into your business, to bring, like, revenue into your business, and that includes kind of tools that can help with responding, like Echo, other tools that can administratively kind of help you manage maybe the portfolio of work. I was doing research on another company that is able to kind of scrape the socials of kind of all these different kind of like brand mentions across kind of the universe of kind of social. So I just am giving that example because that's another great example of kind of tools that are grounded in AI that.
Amazing tools being built, powered or AI enhanced. Absolutely.
Yep. With that said, the burden really kind of comes down to using business infrastructure tools like this, some of which are enhanced with AI, to bring enough revenue into the business, because creators are businesses now, to really kind of create also support around you as a business, because the reality is you can't really do it alone. My prediction is that creators are the new media company, and that's just going to keep on happening. I'm talking to some major media companies
100%.
now, and they're like, we need to figure out how do we have influencer be part of like a thing for 2026 and beyond.
Absolutely. George, I want to go back to talk about the brands. We were discussing how the brands are, yeah. I don't know what's the word that I'm looking for here. Brands are helping or aggregating to the creator burnout, but they are also facing their own challenges. And you work with brands across the whole ecosystem. Tell us a
Mhm.
bit about what you're seeing today. What are they struggling when it comes to influencer marketing today?
Yeah. If you look at the trade, some of it is doom and gloom when it comes to brands and agencies. I think there was another major agency that had just announced like a 4,000 person layoff. So there are fewer dollars flowing through the economy, fewer dollars flowing through the advertising economy because brands have less to spend because their investors are looking at the bottom line and they're cutting budgets. With that said, brands are overspending on categories that perform. Search has always performed for brands. Google search has always performed. Meta has always performed. Social, TikTok is the new thing. It's performing for brands. So I would say that the challenge that brands have is maintaining relevancy and consistency. And when I was on the buy side, when I was at the agency, the question I would get asked every week is, what are you doing to drive new customers? Like, that's fine. Like, we need more customers buying the product. The other thing I'll say is that measurement is a challenge that they're facing because of the issue. If you suddenly are shifting from advertising on the open web defined as any website, you have
Yeah.
data that Facebook is not going to give you. Because if you look at any of these companies' earnings, they themselves have hundreds of billions of dollars in advertising revenue. They need to keep that data for themselves, or so that is another significant major challenge I would say that brand
Measurement.
measurement.
Do you think it's still broken? And if so, what do you see as the biggest gaps? Yeah.
I think it is very broken. The biggest gap is that if you had 10% of budget in the past flowing to the walled gardens defined as TikTok, Meta, Twitter, or X, though that might be 70% now of a brand's budget. So if you blindness before on um, if you kind of had blindness on 10% of your investment before and that now you have data blindness on 70% of your investment, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. So my prediction is that there are going to be analytics companies that kind of, really lean in here and develop solutions for modeling around the gap of data that doesn't exist. And you're beginning to see that. You are beginning to see that. The other thing that I am beginning to see is greater sophistication of brands bringing their own data into the platforms, because if the platforms tell you that you can't take data out, you can bring data in to the platform. It's kind of a one-way street. It's like you can bring whatever you want to the party, but you can't take anything from the party back with you.
Don't taking anything out.
Yeah. So that's the other trend I'm seeing, which is why there's so much focus for all of these companies in terms of like building their own assets, like their first party data assets, like to understand customer base.
George, do you think another challenge is scaling influencers today? And if so, what do you see as the real barrier there?
Scaling influencers, I think, is a artificial constraint that the industry has placed on it because influencer is the same as influencer is not the same as duplicated billions of the way that they call it in ads is like an impression. The currency that brands have gotten used to is I want to place like a billion ads, but I only want to pay 10 cents. The new math has to be I want to place 100,000 really valuable exposures of my product. And of the 100,000, I expect this goes back to measurement, but there are solutions that can help to, but of the 100,000, I anticipate that I will get this kind of return. So the model has to kind of change and not undoable. It's been done before. The way that Google prices their search is very different because they actually price for intent. Like if you're searching for a credit card and you click link that is sponsored by a financial brand, you're going to pay a lot for that because you're paying for that one person who's like in market for.
Yeah. George, after all this conversation about brands, what do you think is the main thing that they consistently misunderstand about working with creators or about creators in general?
I would say that the main thing that brands misunderstand is unfortunately, I think it's the complexity of what goes into
Okay.
producing content, that there'll be a brief provided, and then the question is, "Why can't I have it yesterday?" Or it's not a and the other thing that happens is it's not a standard ad where there's kind of like human element to it. And so I think sometimes the policy teams get a little bit too involved and too heavy-handed in that, well, why did you do this? Why was this in the shot? Like we don't have a relationship with this. So I would say sometimes it's overthinking and it's not really understanding the world of the creator. So it's up to all of us to continue. And myself, I'm taking a heavy burden on this to try to really educate brands as to the best way to engage. But the really positive thing is every brand conversation I've had recently is, tell us more. We really want to understand, like, how can we better align with influencers? Like, we want to support. We want to be like financial sponsors. Like, we want to, invest in the community. So I think the other thing that actually is a huge opportunity is that they oftentimes do acknowledge that they don't have a great understanding of the creator ecosystem.
Yeah. George, as we start to wrap up the conversation, this amazing episode, I want to focus a bit on the future for a moment. Tell us a bit about what part of the future of the creator economy excites you the most right now.
I think that TikTok is giving a lens of the huge economy that can be built around the creator economy because I read an article that came out that the TikTok shop is like one of the fastest growing businesses in the world right now. So, my prediction is that creators are going to become the way that brands are able to connect with new consumers for their products. And the same way that brands have websites and TV stations that they advertise on, that the new model is going to be if you're home beauty, if you're kind of a decor brand, you'll have a list of creators that you work with. And my other prediction is that there are going to be segments of creators, such as a huge creator. We have ComScore in websites, so you might have rank number 1 to 100, rank 100 to 1,000 plus. And my prediction is that there's going to be actually like businesses created around that provide infrastructure because that is a big problem. Right now, creators are doing everything, and that is exacerbating the burnout issue. So the solve there is to create sustainable economic futures for the creators themselves. That's about providing services and technology to kind of make the brand relationships that are brokered sustained and consistent. And then it's about kind of helping to retell the narrative to the brands. How do you need to be talking to your consumers through the creator? And then I think it'll flip. I think that creators are the new media. And that's my big prediction. And I do think there's going to be a lot of technical infrastructure built out over the next few years to support that.
Love to see that. Yeah. And in that prediction, George, is there anything that concerns you, keeps you up at night? Anything that
Uh,
worries you?
I think that the thing that, there's nothing about that that concerns me. The thing that keeps me up at night is I'm kind of wondering how long it's going to take because sometimes the industry knows where it has to go, but it doesn't move. And now I would say that the industry is kind of being forced to move. So I would say that the thing that keeps me up at night is that this is happening in real time and some of the technical infrastructure and required architecture, like if you're constructing a building, the foundation has to be strong. We're like rapidly building that foundation right now as things are moving. But this is a pivotal time in history. I was telling the founders of Echo, I think that this doesn't happen too many times. So we'll look back on this period and this will be the time kind of very similar to when,
I
again,
love the excitement on your face. I know the
yeah,
audience cannot see you, but I love the excitement on your face right now.
yeah, like when YouTube came out, when the internet came out, there are these watershed moments in society. And in my opinion, this is happening right now. So we're kind of living history. And the work that you're doing at Net Influencer, I think is so important. We talked about this before. There are so many media trade publications, but nobody is covering it from this angle. So, I look forward to the opportunity to kind of continue collaborating with you. And to your point about future, it'd be great to kind of consider brand roundtables where like creators, brands can kind of get together for
We're working on that.
right?
There's a lot to come in 2026.
Yeah, so we look forward to being part of that. I look forward to being part of that.
George, again, as we start to wrap up the conversation, I have to thank you for your time again. We covered a lot of important topics. We talked about challenges, opportunities, the shifts that are happening across the industry. But I do want to go back to your role as you look ahead to 2026, your role at ECMO. How are you approaching your work moving forward? What becomes your priority as a leader, given everything we've discussed today?
Yeah, I would say that my role at Echo is really going to be about evangelizing and really creating this market, almost like market making. That's typically what I do within roles. I kind of look at gaps in the market and then I help to connect the dots of what seems obvious but isn't happening yet. So in my role, I am really galvanizing and pushing forth this narrative of creator being the new media. And what that involves is just heavy, heavy on the ground work with brands. We talked about agencies that have interest in influencer marketing. So I'll be on the ground at CES. I think we talked about it. Will you all be there too? At, in Las Vegas, and separately, ad tech companies, which we didn't even really talk about that much, but there's a huge ecosystem of companies now that are connecting the dots, that are moving ads through the ecosystem. These companies run billions of dollars between them. My other goal is to kind of align creator more successfully with existing businesses because the money is there, and to just kind of, really, really be heavy boots on the ground for, I would say, for the majority of 2026.
Well, George, as you mentioned before, I look forward to keep working together. Um, and thank you again for your time today. Is there anything else that you want to share with us? Any final comments, final messages for anyone listening?
I think that, one message I would say is that really own the influence that you have as a creator because the brands are noticing. Never feel that one is not allowed in any room because, I'm sure you'll be allowed in any room with like open arms. There is that. And then, Ceci, what I will say is that, I as well really look forward to collaborating with Net Influencer and you specifically. I think the work that you're doing is so important and, really talking about these topics that don't get enough attention, such as like burnout, because burnout is
It's a
massive
huge
and if not
issue.
addressed, it can be a snowballing problem.
You can. Yeah. Yeah. George, that's why we love to have this kind of conversation. So thanks again for your kind words. Thanks again for your time today. And as I said before, we'll keep working together and having the real conversations. And I think that's a wrap up for this episode. Thank you, George, again for your time. Thanks so much, everyone in the audience for tuning in. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing on what's next in influencer marketing and the creator economy. Until next time, talk soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.